Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined live from London by British politician and broadcaster George Galloway. George, thank you so much for joining us here on RT to discuss the situation. Well, just a few hours ago, it emerged that, in fact, it was a threat coming from a leader of Ukraine's far-right group, Right Sector, who was threatening to blow up the pipeline that connects Russia and Europe. What do you make of this threat? And, in fact, what message does it send across?
Well, it's a very serious threat, and they have the means and capability easily to carry it out. So the West must be wondering, at least if they have any sense, just what kind of a Frankenstein monster have they created in Ukraine when they encouraged and funded $50 a head per day the people who overthrew the elected government, destroyed the Constitution, set fire to the government buildings, killed policemen. That must have all looked rather thrilling in Western chanceries, unless they had read the novel Frankenstein right to the end. Because if they had, they'd know that the monster that Dr. Frankenstein created quickly got out of control. That's why it's called a monster. And this monstrous threat by the right sector is a very grave one for people in Europe, because at least a third of the European Union's gas supply is coming from Russia. And if the pipeline's blown up, then we won't have any. And then we'll be in very serious trouble indeed.
Well, speaking of which, I mean, what sort of reaction do you think might come from Europe to this threat? As up until now, I mean, the West and the UK government too haven't been reacting really to some harsh words coming out of Kiev.
No, they've ignored not just words, but actions. A Jewish leader was severely beaten in Kiev just yesterday by the openly anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi forces that the West has been backing. But that's because most of their population are not paying attention. But they'll certainly pay attention if they turn their cooker on or their heating on and there's no gas. So it does move us into new territory. That's undoubtedly true.
Well, as we speak, Mr. Galloway, there's a referendum going on in Crimea, and the Western leaders said that they will not recognize it as legitimate. However, at this point, we're hearing from foreign observers that everything is going according to international norms. So what do you think will happen? I mean, will this be taken into account, the findings that come and the assessments that come from international observers?
Well, you know, when you destroy the Constitution, as these coup forces did in Kiev, when you destroy the presidency, destroy the buildings even of the presidency, when you have what you call a revolution and others call a coup, all bets are off. And when you cancel the Russian language, you can't expect an area where 97% of the people are Russian speakers. People who live in a country, Crimea, which for centuries was a part of Russia and was given away in a very capricious act without consulting the people of Crimea at all by Premier Khrushchev at the time, in my lifetime, in fact, then you must expect a reaction, and the reaction is a democratic one. The Parliament voted overwhelmingly to hold a referendum. The people appear to be voting overwhelmingly in the referendum. And everyone should respect that result. After all, in September in Scotland, the rest of the people in the United Kingdom will not be voting in a referendum, but the Scottish people will. And the British government will have to recognise the result of that referendum. There are many other examples I could give, but I fasten on one. The Western countries, my own included, indeed in the front rank, have been pushing every which way for the recognition of Kosovo as an independent state, even though it's in quite a state for a state. It's entirely dependent on the international community and military and other funds to be regarded as an independent country, because the people of Kosovo want, in their majority, to be an independent country. But of course, the rest of the territory in which Kosovo lies, namely the state of Serbia, don't want that. But that hasn't stopped the West from recognizing Kosovan quote unquote, independence. So it's absolutely hypocritical, the stand that they are taking in the United Nations. They said that this referendum would be illegal because of the Ukrainian constitution. But there is no Ukrainian constitution. It was ripped up by the coup which the Western countries supported. And why are the Crimeans not allowed to decide their future in an act of self-determination when the Scottish people clearly are?
All right. British MP, author and broadcaster George Galloway, thank you so much for your insight.
Welcome.